Okay, so I've got here our drawing showing the site, and what I'm going to do now in the same file is add in more detail. So I've called this one site access, but I'm going to save it now, and we're going to do it as combined project drawing. So I'm just going to call this EDi project drawing should do. And then just want to make sure I've got the layers organised reasonably well before I go in and add some more detail. So I'm going to go into layer properties, and you can see here I've got some layers that have come in from something else I've been doing, but they're set up reasonably well with the naming there, and so that's actually a pretty good system to follow. So I've got there these layers: a door frame, a glass, a wall, and then a wall pattern. And I'm going to make maybe a couple of other layers to go with those, just following the same system. So I'm going to click on the new layer button, and so A for architectural is a good prefix to put before your layer names. It keeps them at the top as well. Sometimes people just put 0, but A works well. So a window is probably a good one for obviously the window joinery essentially. So that will be the window frame in most cases, because the glass will be inside that. So we don't need, so with the doors you've got a layer for the door itself, but in the case of the windows that will be for the window frame. We don't need a window frame layer. But then we're going to need some layers for elevation as well, or projection. We're going to make another layer called a window PROJ for projection. And if it's not clear why you need those layers, you'll see as we start drawing which parts of the window will go onto which of those two layers. So then I'm just going to have a look at these line weights. So, like I said, these line weights, or these layers I set up earlier, and they'll set up something else. So I'm going to make them more appropriate for the sort of drawing we'll be doing. So going into the door layer, that's going to be cut. So I'm going to make that fairly thick. So I'll start off, try and make it 0.35. Might need to become lighter if we're going to do larger scales. So for 1 to 100 that might be a bit too heavy, but for 1 to 50 that should work well, and any more detailed drawings as well. The door frame probably needs to be a bit lighter because the frame will have a little bit more detail, so maybe 0.25. But the idea there is that those things are both being cut, so you want to have them with as heavy a line weight as possible without losing detail. Glazing as well, so the glass is cut, and you want to have glass with as heavy a line weight as you possibly can to indicate the glass thickness as well, so you don't need 2 lines for your glass. So I'm going to try 0.4 for that one. The wall, 0.35 should be good. The wall pattern, so that's a hatch, I want to make that light, so 0.15, maybe even lighter, we'll see what happens there. Then the window, so that's the window frame, remember, so same as the door frame, 0.25, and then we maybe can push those both a bit higher. The door frame and the window can maybe become a bit heavier depending on how close the lines are together, but we'll start with that. And then the window projection layer should be as light as the hatch pattern at least, so 0.15, maybe even a little lighter, 0.13. Okay, so if you're wondering whether you have rules or standards for line weights with your layers, there really are no standards or rules. There are guidelines, but you need to use your judgment depending on the drawing to work out what the line weights should be. And so you're probably getting used to that as you produce more and more detailed drawings. But maybe I can show you some actually. So I'll just very quickly highlight this. No. So I'll talk about the colours in a second as well. But no, that's fine. That's good to think about that because I'll be doing that next. Oops, not one direction, one drive. So I'm just going to get some of my files that aren't here. Well, actually, so I'm just going to log in. I'm going to show you. I'll show you those after I finish recording, actually. But definitely want to give you some examples of line weights, so don't let me forget that. But there, with the layers, I'll just finish off making the colours. So I'm going to set the doors to a colour that's commonly used for joinery, and that's yellow. And then the door frame can either be the same colour or a different shade of that colour, so that you know it belongs in the same category but it's on a different layer. So you can see here you've got these other yellow colours up the top, which should read differently usually. You don't want to make it too close. 50 is quite close to the original yellow, so maybe a slightly different shade. So that's if it's timber. We're working with timber doors here, but you may have metal as well, so blue is the normal colour for metal. Glass, the normal colour is cyan, so I'll use that, colour number 4. So remember your standard colours down the bottom, and then you have the other index colours above. Walls, so they're mostly brick or masonry here, so I'm going to use red or a hue of red. Now, red can be difficult to see on the screen, especially when I'm working on the projector. So I'll often, for masonry or brick, use one of these clay type colours, because brickwork is clay anyway, and so that sort of reads nicely. And then the hatch pattern for the walls, again a shade of one of those colours is often good. Okay, so the windows, like I was saying, are, well in this case they're metal, so like I was saying the colour for metal is blue. And blue again can be difficult to read on the screen, especially when I'm showing on the projector, so I'm going to shed a shade of blue. And so I'll make that one a little bit darker, so it reads as being cut. Maybe that one should be okay. And then the window projection layer, I'm going to make it a lighter shade of that colour. And that'll be clearer once we start drawing. Okay, so again, you can see I'm using a bit of guesswork to set the colours. If you're wondering, I do have templates with in fact, with all of those layers made and a lot more, and I'll show you maybe some of them after I finish recording. And I do have pretty standard colours for all these things. You can see I'm following a system, but there are no real fixed rules required for setting colours. It's even looser than line weights because it's only going to be visible for you on the screen. You're going to print everything black and white, except for maybe the odd colour here and there. And so it's just a visual cue for you to see which layer an object's on. Okay, so you can see I've already got an image layer and I've placed the image onto that layer. So if you haven't done that, you need to make sure you've done that, because we've got this satellite image, and if you select the border, you won't see the layer that it's on straight away. Maybe you need to go back to the Home tab, and then you should see the layer it's on. So you can make sure it's on the image layer, and then I'm just going to go and click on the layer list there and turn that layer off using the light bulb, so that's not in the way. And then you can see I've drawn my walls with the hatching. Now we haven't really looked at hatching much yet, so I might delete that and leave it with just the line work. We can come back to redo the hatching anyway. So I'm going to take all of the hatching away from those walls there. And so don't worry if you don't have the hatching, but you should at least have the line work done with the wall thickness. And if you're not sure of the wall thickness, I've just made it 300. If it's different, we can easily offset from that line and change that later. But the important thing is we've got this set out point, so that corner point there is visible in the room here, and we can then now start using the measurements that you've taken to put in the room sizes. So remember, we're going to assume that it's square, so in other words at right angles. And so I'm going to firstly make sure that that there is a right angle, just using the dimension tool. So I'll go to angular and choose these two lines. So you can see there that's exactly 90 degrees. If your dimensions don't come up like that, just quickly go into your dimension style. So clicking on the annotation panel there, you can click on the dimension style button. Make sure it's set to annotative. And then go to modify and check that symbols and arrows are set to architectural tick, and the rest of the settings you can worry about later. So that's the main thing. And then also I'll show you if you have problems with the text. The text should be okay, but just in case, go to the text tab and just make sure it's got standard with a height here, so you can type in 2 or 2.5 for the text type. And actually, maybe one last thing, if you go to go to primary units and make sure you've got a period for the decimal separator. Sometimes it's got a comma. And then make sure once you finish that, if it's not set, go to set current, and you'll see that it should say current dimension style annotative. So choose annotative obviously before you choose set current. And then once you close that, you need to also set the scale down on the annotative scale option to 1 to 50. Okay, so do all of those things, and then you should be able to use your dimensions straight away. So go into your dimension, any dimension tool, and you should see the measurements just like mine. So I'll do another dimension just to make that clear. If I do an aligned dimension from here to, let's just go to here. Again, I can read that measurement clearly. That's really useful when you're doing drawings like this. You can of course use the measure tool that I've been showing you as well, but it is really useful to be able to bring up dimensions that are going to remain there. Okay, so now I'm just going to start putting in the measurements that you've taken, and one of the best ways of getting a distance from an existing line is to use the offset tool. So with offset now, I can type in the linear dimension that you've taken, 9947. Oh, sorry, I misread it. Sorry, let's do that again. So 9941. So from that line there, I'm going to select the line and then click any point down and to the right. And now I need to repeat the offset command. So the quick way to do that is to press enter twice. So that completes the command the first time you press enter, and then pressing enter again repeats the command and prompts you for a new distance. And so then the next one going the other way is 7793. Enter, and now select this line, go to the right, and then again enter twice to enter a new distance. The next one is 1210. Selecting the line, clicking to the right, and enter twice, and then the next one is 850. So this line here needs to come down 850 below. At that point, I'm going to stop putting in any more lines and tidy up what I've got, otherwise it'll get too confusing. So that's really the approach I'm trying to get you used to. So you want to use commands like offset to set out your measurements, but then make sure you clean up your line work using tools like fillet and trim. So I'll start with fillet. So I'm going to make sure it's set to 0 radius. and then choose 2 lines to join them together at a corner. And again, I can press enter to repeat the command each time. So just going around like that. We should then have an outline of the room, and I can at this point check the measurement for this wall, and you'll see that it may be different to what you've taken. And this can show you how, things that seem perfectly square, this room probably seems like it is at an exact right angle, but we know now that it's not. So these walls are not perfectly square because that measurement there is 9091. But you've measured it with a laser measuring tool, and it was, if you've got your drawings there, hopefully you can see the measurement, 9096. So it's only 5 mil, but that is still means it's not perfectly square. If you wanted to, you could use that method I showed you before to work out your angles. By taking a diagonal measurement across the room, then we could work out the exact angle of all of these walls. And if you're building in here, you should definitely do that. So the next one I'll show you again. So this is 9003. If you look at your drawing, it's actually been measured at 8987. So that's a fair bit out. That's 15 mil out. And when you go to put in even things like, say, ceiling panels, they need to fit exactly. And so you need to be able to give those sizes exactly to the builders. So when you do your own projects, if you're going to have things built from your measurements, then it's important that you can take accurate measurements. And if something's not square, don't draw it as square. But in this case, we can cheat a little bit and round off those measurements. Okay, so we're going to just have to remember that some of the measurements you've taken won't be drawn exactly that way, and we've got to decide which way to draw it. So it's up to you, but you maybe want to draw it the same way I have, using those measurements going clockwise from our set-out point. So remember, the set-out point is this one here, and maybe to make that clear, I'm going to mark that using the point tool. Okay, so we don't have a good layer for that, so I might actually just go and make one. So I just made a layer called set out. It won't print, so the layer, the line weight doesn't really matter. I'm going to make it white so it's nice and clear and stands out. And actually, so while I'm at it in layer properties, I can set it straight away to be non-printing. So that can be really useful to have that option on for the layers that are there mainly just for construction purposes. And then I'm going to go under the Draw sub-menu there, and sorry, it's not there. Where's it gone? It's under one of these. So you've got there some of the options for points. Why can't I see the individual point option? Well, it's got multiple point there, which does the same thing. But actually, they used to have the individual point. I'm used to using the shortcut, so actually I don't look at these options all the time. But yeah, multiple point is fine. So this one here. And then I'm just going to click on the corner point there and press enter or escape to cancel. In fact, escape is what you need to press. So there's a point there, and if I make a window left to right, you'll see it'll select it, but I can't see the point. Just going to do that again to select it, and I'll put it onto my correct layer, set out, but I still can't see it. So do you know what to do to make the points visible in AutoCAD? Yeah, you'd think they'd have an option down here, but it's actually in a funny place. It's in Utilities. And there you've got Point Style. That's a really useful option because there are lots of extremely useful tools that you should know that work with points. So things like Divide and Measure also use points. So you need to know how to set your point style. So again, under Utilities, you have that Point Style option. And there you can choose any option. I'm just going to choose the cross, but choose any that you like. It's just a graphical display. Click OK, and then you'll see your points. Now, you'll see that if you zoom in and out, they may change size. So I'll zoom right out there and then just regen, and you can see it's changed size on me. If I zoom in, regen, it's going to change size again. So I'm going to go back to that point style option, and instead of setting the size relative to the screen, I'm going to set a size in absolute units. Okay, and then I'm going to make that 50. Click OK, and now that point will remain that size no matter what. Okay, so maybe if we're going to do this at 1 to 50, actually 100 might be better. So that's just so you know where your main set-out point is, and try to take your measurements from there. And again, if you're not sure, measure clockwise, and then if another measurement is different, you can see in some cases actually I've gone, sorry, I did go anti-clockwise the first time, but I had to because the overall measurement was in that direction. So you can't always measure clockwise, but if you have a choice, then try to measure clockwise. Okay, so then looking at the door position, so just make sure we've got the right one. Yep, so the next drawing, which I think, hopefully you've got these in the right order. So this is the one with the windows on the right hand side that I'm using. So I won't make you watch me do all of this, but I'll just make a start on it so you've got an idea how to set these things out. Right, so we don't have a wall thickness measured as yet, I don't think. That's something you might need to check. But the people doing materials, did you measure the wall thickness? Or did you try to measure the wall thickness? No, I didn't think so, no. That's okay, we can just assume. No, well that's for the exterior walls. The interior walls will be different. Yeah. So I'd say they're just single skin. But we'll check that anyway. So for now, actually, yeah, someone can go and have a look. Can you see over there? Is it? Yep. Just because I've got the mic on me, I can't get up. Is it single or double? Do you think? Okay, and one thing as well that hopefully the materials people did get is the column that you have next to the door there. $154. Okay, so that's odd. Yeah, right. So it's yeah, no, but is that just the wall? Yeah, just the wall. Yeah. So 154. 154. Okay, that's unusual. Right. Okay, so no, that's normal. So we've got, it'll be single skin brickwork, and then they've got really thick render. That's all I can think is. Unless it's not standard bricks, which is also possible. That's okay though, as long as we know what it is, we can put that thickness in, and then yeah, I'll have to maybe have a look at what the construction is. But then notice how you've got a column next to the next to the door as well. I'm just trying to see if you've got the materials marked on your drawings. I think that one might have been missed. Yeah, it has been. Okay, so we'll have a look at that as well. Alright, so you've done a good job with the internal measurements, but you need to definitely have a closer look at the way materials are indicated and measured. Yeah, I can't see that on any drawings. Okay, so we've got the internal measurement there from the corner as 130. So again, a good way with that is to use offset. So I've got offset there with the distance 130. And so the wall thickness, we can round off to 150, I think. We're not going to be changing it much anyway. So what do you say, it was 140 something or 154. So let's round off and say 150. Okay, so now again I'm going to join these lines together, but a bit differently to how I did it before. So I'm going to select that line, and then hovering over the grip, I'm going to go to lengthen. And that's really important because I want to keep that line at the same angle. And I'm just going to extend it by a fairly arbitrary distance so that it goes a fair way beyond the endpoint it's at now. So just taking it maybe a bit more than a metre past the corner there. And then I'm going to offset the opening size. So we'll come back and draw in the door joinery later. So I'm going to draw 980 or offset 980 above. And now I'm going to use trim instead of fillet to clean up those lines. Trim will work better in this case. So make sure you've got trim chosen, not extend. And I'm going to select all of these lines here as my cutting edges. So the two wall lines and the two lines for the opening. Then press enter, and now I can click on the lines that I want to trim or remove. Notice I've left this one because that one is thicker. You've got the column there. Okay, now the column thickness I don't think is shown on anyone's drawings. So like I said, when you're taking measurements like this, you've got to go outside the room as well. So there's one on the corner there. Yeah. Just next to the door. Okay, so for now we can just assume the thickness. Maybe we'll go and take a measurement in a while, but for now let's just assume it's 350. So I'm going to offset 350 from this line here, and then I can just use fillet to join those together and remove that line. So that's the way you want to set out openings, especially for things like doors, but also windows. Do the whole opening first and then come back and add the detail later. So draw the door in afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to show you a way to get started drawing the door now. And so I'm going to switch to my layer. Up until now I haven't worried about changing to different layers because I've been offsetting and copying lines that are already on the correct layer. But now I want to draw some new things, and I'm going to use firstly the door frame layer actually. Okay, so one way to draw a door is just to draw using lines. So I'm going to use the line tool from the corner here to the opposite corner. And for now, we're just going to draw a simplified door, which will be with a 40mm door jamb. And we'll definitely make this more detailed later, but for now, just a simplified 40mm by 100mm rectangle. So I can offset 100 from this line, because it's 100 in that direction. And then again, enter twice, and then my 40mm dimension from the lines that I have either side of the opening. And then using trim again. Here I don't need to select any cutting edges, I can just press enter to make everything a cutting edge. So that's a really useful shortcut. When it asks you to select cutting edges, think about what you're doing. You either need to select something or press enter. So remember that if you're having trouble with trim. Now I can just choose the lines I want removed. And then I'm going to choose these two lines and make sure they're on the door frame layer so that I can start to see the line weight. So I'm going to click on the line weight tool there, which you can see now has made the wall lines particularly stand out a bit more because they're thicker, and it makes it clear that these lines are on the correct layer. Okay, so I'm just going to show you some tricks then to get the door drawn. So I'm going to go to my door layer, and then I'm going to draw a line for the door. I want it to be parallel with this wall because we want to show the door open. But that can be pretty tricky to achieve. So what I'm going to do instead of drawing it at the angle I want it to be at in the end, you can use tricks to get it to go using the extension option. You can get it to snap to that angle. But an easier way is just to draw it from the corner here where the hinge is, up and to the right to the opposite corner on the door frame. Press enter. And then select the line and use rotate to rotate it using that same starting point as your hinge, and type in 90 to put it in the opening position to get it at the same angle as the wall instead of trying to draw it in that position initially. It's just like you're opening the door after you've drawn it. And then when you go to draw your door swing, we'll need to make a door swing layer in a second, but just for now, before I finish up, I'll just show you the option to use there, start center end. So you can start on the corner, the center point is going to be the hinge, and then the end point is going to be the other end of the door. But make sure you make a layer. I'll just do that very quickly actually. Called A door swing. Set it to your lightest line weight, 0.09 or maybe 0.05 even. Try 0.09 because it's 1 to 50. And the colour, it's up to you. And then you can put that door arc onto that layer to get a nice light line weight. And so that should give you enough to start doing your set out for that room, and I'll do another video to show you the windows in a second.